Welcome to Jesus Changes Everything, a daily podcast dedicated to providing a fresh look at the ancient and glorious truth that Jesus not only reigns, but is busy about the business of bringing all things under subjection, that celebrates the wonder and the glory that he has been given all authority in heaven and on earth.
The critics of the critics aren't real happy that the critics have dubbed it the ministry of truth. Around the same time that entrepreneur Elon Musk had made the bid to turn Twitter private, the President of the United States made an announcement that the Department of Homeland Security, that department which was created in the wake of 9/11, it seems a little odd to me, nevertheless, that it even exists, not because 9/11 wasn't a serious thing, but because we already have a Department of Defense. If the Department of Defense is not the same thing as the Department of Homeland Security, then what in the world is it? In any case, this Department of Homeland Security, which has been in the news over the years for illegal wiretaps and things of that nature, now is going to have this working group that's going to work on fighting against what is considered to be disinformation or misinformation. Now, it is a real thing, misinformation and disinformation. It's a common thing. If you go back to the days of World War II, you may recall or may have learned about those who would go on the radio and try to demoralize the Allied troops with tales from home about their girls not being faithful. This is all part of what is called psychological or psyops, waging psychological warfare against the enemy, and disinformation can be a part of that. And, by the way, I'm not in the least bit suggesting that it's not possible for instance, a foreign power that wants to sway an election to create a kind of, what's the word for it? A tsunami of public opinion pointed in a particular direction, that there is this propensity for all of us to believe what we think everyone else believes. And so, for instance, if our feed is always showing us people, supporting lockdowns, then we're going to tend to think, yes, they're necessary. There's a name for this psychologically, but I can't remember what it is. But it's very, very common. And there's a reason that people might attempt to sort of harness that for their own particular ends. But the reason people might want to harness that for their own particular ends is because people are bad. This is a fundamental, common problem that we have that encourages the growth of the size and scope of the government. Those who know me know that I have spent the better part of my life defending free trade. That is the moral right that men and women have to make business decisions on their own without the interference of the government. And it's fascinating. I've done this many, many times teaching at a secular college. I'll ask in a philosophy class, I'll ask my students this: should people be able to make business decisions without interference from the government? I've never once had a single student say no. Well, the next question is it okay if I offer, say, Jim here, who's sitting in the front row, I say, Jim, I'd like you to come up to my house up in Fort Wayne, and I'd like you to clean my gutters, and I'm more than happy to pay you $5 an hour. And if Jim agrees to do that, is everybody still okay with that? And they all agree still. I said, do you realize that if we did that, he and I could both be arrested? Minimum wage laws carry with it penalties for not honoring them. And so you all support minimum wage laws, but yet you think you believe in people making economic decisions on their own. Well, here's what we get then. That's when the real thinking comes out. Okay, they say, well, I guess we don't believe that people should be free to make their own economic decisions because people are bad. People are bad. And typically it's other people. It's business owners who are bad. It's bosses who are bad. Because if you ask these same people again, are people basically good or basically bad? They'll tell you basically good every single time. But when it's someone that has a business, those people are bad. And they'll say, well, people are bad. I say, okay. You believe that people are bad, and that's why we need government to make sure that people don't be bad. They say, yes. I say, okay. Well, who is in the government? Who runs the government? And the truth is, the simple answer is people. It is a bad thing. And I said, here's the thing. If I offer Jim here $5 an hour, and you all don't think that's fair, and he doesn't think that's fair, all he has to do is say, no, thank you. But if I say I'm willing to pay $5, but I'm not willing to pay $15 or $7.50, depending on where you live, the government comes along and says, you can't do that. They are the one imposing force. So let's bring that back to the ministry of truth. I know people lie on the internet because people are liars. And I know that when people in the government say, well, people lie on the internet, and that's why we need to have a ministry of information. Well, or ministry of truth, what are they going to do? These are the same people who not only were wrong about the efficacy of masks in stopping the spread of COVID, but who knew they were wrong all along. Are you following me here? These are people who are willing to lie, who are now coming to us and saying, you need to trust us to decide who and what you can hear and who and what you can listen to. Because, if you don't, you might get some bad information. Well, you might get some bad information. And if you do, you might get some bad information. Bad information comes from bad people, and bad people are all people. Now, I don't know if there's anybody out there, at least not listening to today's podcast. I don't know if there's anybody out there who thinks, yeah, this is a good idea. We really need a ministry of truth. I'm guessing that so far you're all with me and agreeing with what I've said thus far. The question is, what does it say about the culture that we're living in that this idea could even be floated? We have this idea that because of the Constitution, in fact, I've seen this in the last couple of weeks. Oh, we keep having victories for First Amendment victory here, First Amendment victory there. We have a culture that is rapidly and openly denying the God-given right of freedom of speech. Our neighbors to the north, our friends across the pond, already have laws in place where it is considered a crime to publicly affirm certain things that the Bible clearly teaches. So this idea, again, if the Constitution were actually the law of the land, then yes, we would be safe. But it's not. It's not the law. It should be. legally, it's the ultimate standard. But they don't pay attention. What protects free speech is not the Constitution, but people actually believing in it. You understand that. That when push comes to shove, again, all it would take would be a 2/3 majority of citizens to believe, it should be against the law to say this or to say that. Or, the government ought to be able to give its imprimatur to certain statements and its disapproval to others. Yeah, the government should create an agency of fact-checking experts. And it'll happen. Now, the good news is none of that changes what's true. You can make it against the law to say homosexual behavior is sinful. Not only will it still be sinful, but Christians, in submission to the Lord Jesus Christ, will continue to say so. And Christians who won't, well, they'll grieve the Spirit. What I'm trying to say is, as powerful as the government is, as out of line as the government can be, as unconstitutional as the government can be, it never gets above Jesus. They are the means to God's end. And by the way, it's the same thing in every earthly system of authority that Jesus has established. That is, parents are not perfect. They're sinners. Husbands who have authority over their wives are not perfect. Elders who have authority in the church, they're not perfect. The very same Jesus who is perfect, who does rule over all things, has called us to exercise human rule in submission to him. Right now we have a government which is increasingly in rebellion against him. But I believe that he can manage that. I believe that he's not surprised by it. I believe that he, in fact, has ordained this for the well-being of his bride. That well-being may not be to get us to stop saying things he doesn't want us to say. The well-being may be the blessing of persecution. So please, don't be afraid. Tell the truth. Trust in Jesus. And the ministry of truth will, in the end, go down the memory hole.
You've been listening to the Jesus Changes Everything podcast, a production of Dunamis Fellowship, the teaching outreach of Dr. R.C. Sproul Jr. If you've enjoyed this podcast, we encourage you to subscribe, which you can do at all the usual outlets, to tell your friends, and to spread the word. To learn more about the work of Dunamis Fellowship, please visit rcsproulJR.com. And join us next time on Jesus Changes Everything.